All right, welcome to an extra special episode of the FitFile podcast. So for those of you on the YouTube side of things, you'll probably see exactly where we are. We are at WWDC 2024 at Apple's headquarters.
Indeed. In their podcast studio, we have a whole host of people behind the cameras doing all the hard work. We don't have to do anything. We get to drink water. No beer like last time, though, unfortunately. Nope. So apparently that was not on the allowed list.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, so you will probably notice that we look and sound probably a lot better than we usually do. But yeah, so this is going to be a great little setup where we basically just got done with listening to the keynote where they just had a huge amount of new announcements for iPad, for Mac, as well as WatchOS.
Yep, and then from there we were able to get a little more detail on some of these things and how they work and dive into sort of the nuances a little bit. And it's that we're going to take into this episode here and really go down quite a bit deeper than the keynote did on a lot of these features and how they work and our thoughts on them and how they compare to what's out there and what's been in there in the past. And it should be a lot of fun.
And I think that's probably something to really note is that during the keynote, they went through these features so quickly, and there were a lot of very compelling features that they mentioned, but then after diving into those details, holy cow, there's a lot to cover here.
Exactly. I mean, keynote was 2 and some hours long, roughly. Yeah. And there were some line items there that were like just literally one tiny item on a slide at the very bottom, and that we're going to talk about here for like 10 minutes at a time because they're super detailed stuff. Maybe a very quick, though, background on what WWDC is, which is Apple's annual Worldwide Developer Summit or conference. And so that is an event that happens each June, roughly. And it's where Apple announces all their software features for virtually all their platforms, all their upcoming software features, aimed initially at developers, but ultimately it's telling you the story of all the consumer features. And so most of what we saw today in the keynote, they'd first talk about the consumer side of it, and then a couple seconds later, they talk about the developer back-end portion of that, how developers can take advantage of that. And so the way it works is the developer beta gets dropped essentially today, and that allows developers access to it. And then in a few weeks, in early July, it'll go to public beta, so anyone on the planet can download those features. And then in September, it goes to production. And at that point, it's basically part of any new watch that's out there. And that's typically when we then see Apple add in or announce new watches and phones and other devices like that.
So there's basically like 3 big chunks, I guess you could say, of features that were announced today. So stuff on the training side of things, stuff on the health side of things, and then stuff like, more new smartwatch features as well. So we should probably start with the more big ticket, like training and sports related items, I think.
So I'd say probably one of the most interesting things. I mean, certainly today was a lot about Apple Intelligence, AI, and things like that. Just to give a bit of a spoiler there, absolutely none of that's touching the watch side. But there's a lot of other features that are cool for watch people that I think we're going to, that will kind of expand on that.
And, there's definitely stuff on the machine learning side of things, but not necessarily like the artificial intelligence side of things.
Exactly.
Yeah, totally. So
I think let's go to the very first big ticket item, which is training load.
Yeah, well, I don't know. We should talk about training load as well as their effort rating or effort score, because there's correlation between the two and they relate to each other, but they're different. And so I think it's good to kind of go over the differences between them.
Yeah, so we're going to start by saying we're going to talk about training load and then immediately talk about effort rating first, because you have to have effort rating to get training load. So
we're doing it backwards then.
We are, but it's the chicken and the egg. You can't have who knows what you can have, but
you can't have the roast chicken without the.
Yeah. That is definitely true. Okay. So in this case, effort rating. Let's start there.
Yeah, because that's a per workout sort of thing.
Exactly. Okay. So you're going to complete your workout, and there are 17 different workout types where it'll automatically give you an effort rating at the end of it. And so those are generally higher cardio type workout scenarios, so running and things like that. And that effort rating will basically be a score between 1 and 10, with 10 being absolutely miserably hard, so an all-out effort, and 1 being what we're doing right now.
But it's based on your workout intensity. But workout intensity isn't just necessarily your heart rate. That could be related to stuff like pace as well as elevation, right?
Correct. Yeah. Yep. And also it's individual, so it's going to include age and height and weight and other factors as well.
Yeah, totally. So, so the interesting thing about effort rating, like you said, was that this is going to be based, or this is going to be automatically calculated for cardio-based activities. And then you'll be able to actually adjust this rating based on your feeling. But additionally, you'll be able to add your effort rating for any activities that don't get automatically calculated. So yeah, so it's
like
basically
Pilates or strength training.
Yeah, it's just like a perceived effort sort of thing. Yeah, yeah, for that workout. Yeah. So.
And we'll circle back to why that's so interesting in just a minute.
Very
because
much so.
That is a huge difference between what Apple's doing and what really everyone else in the industry is doing around how you judge a given workout from a load standpoint.
Well, and I guess that's what's interesting, right? Is that it's effort rating. It's unique in itself, right? Just because it's sort of a combination of a lot of things. It's not you can't really call effort rating load in any sense. It's more like it's really your workout intensity. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So which leads us, I guess, into training load.
Yep. So training load then takes your effort rating for a given workout and then multiplies it by the duration and then plots it on a 7-day and a 28-day trended score, essentially. So just like virtually every other watch out there has a 7-day training load and a 28-day training load, and the 7-day tends to be weighted for recency. So if we went out, yesterday we rode a reasonable hard ride, but if we then did today a long run, tomorrow it'll weight today and yesterday heavier than stuff I did a week ago.
Yep. And so basically, like I think Garmin has something called like load ratio, which is going to be very similar. Basically comparing your acute training load to your chronic training load over time. So, and the way this is useful is going to be, let's say you want to like ramp up your training load over time to like build up to a marathon or something like that. You can use this to basically make sure that you're not ramping up too quickly, or not ramping up enough, sort of thing. And same thing goes for maybe tapering for a race, where you can use it to actually taper properly too. But I guess let's go and get into the most interesting thing about how this is calculated, though. Yeah.
So the calculation is based on, again, your particular, that effort rating first. So you take that effort rating of 1 to 10, and then from there you go ahead and you take your duration and you multiply those together. And you don't see the exact score. So if you look at most of the wearables, that give you a score for a workout. So I think my 10K run this morning was like 194 or something like that.
And that's a trimmed calculation.
Exactly. Yeah. Yep. And so it gives you a score. Apple has kind of hidden all that from you. So you just see relative amounts. And so you're going to see these two trend lines in training load. One is a white line, which is showing you your 28-day average training load. And then you have the squiggly line on the screenshot we hope to put somewhere in the middle that shows you your 7-day training load that varies. And so those two things, then below that, you're going to see that basically whether you're above or below your trend line. So it'll say well below, below, steady, above, and well above.
Now, I think a very important other note, though, is that your actual training load that's used for those trend calculations, though, is your effort rating multiplied by your duration of your workout. And that's where it kind of gets a little bit interesting, right? Just because, training load in a traditional sense is basically the measure of the intensity that you're spending, or the measure of the intensity that you're spending in different heart rate zones. And, so it's just kind of like this number that you get sort of thing. But so, a longer workout at a medium duration could be about the same as, let's say, a shorter workout at a super high intensity at that point. But with this, it's a little bit different
because you can tweak it, right?
Exactly.
And it's so historically, like you said, it's effectively all about heart rate.
Yeah.
The higher the heart rate, et cetera. And so the one scenario where this really shines, the way Apple's doing it, is that long hiking scenario. So I've done a lot of stupid long trucks where you're going out and doing 10 to 14 hours a day, but you're not necessarily at a like balls to the wall heart rate, right? You're just simply at a steady heart rate to be able to maintain that. In a typical wearable, like if I track that on Garmin or Polar, that has the same effort as my 10K run this morning. Right? And my 10K run this morning was just like just running around the whole loop thing.
Totally.
But I will get a load there that'll be sub 200 for that entire day. And of course, at the end of the day, I can't walk anymore because it's not accounting for muscular load.
Exactly.
Versus this can indirectly account for muscular load, because even if Apple misses and assigns it a 2 or 3 based on heart rate or elevation or something else, you can just simply adjust that slider, and that'll instantly instantly adjust your training load as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, same thing goes for, if there maybe was a workout, you're just like, well, this is like, super easy. And maybe it's accidentally accounted, too high an effort rating. You can actually adjust that down. So yeah, no, I think it's fascinating because this does take subjective feedback into the whole equation. So is it, I guess there's definitely science behind this, but there's obviously just like your own perception as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because the automatically calculated effort score is science-based from an algorithm standpoint, right?
Yeah.
And that's that. But the second you decide to drag that score to anything else, right, you're just YOLOing and being like, yep, I don't really believe you. This was easy or hard. Yeah. Which, as long as you're consistent to yourself, is fine, right? If you're not looking at this from a coaching standpoint, where a coach is trying to figure out how to plan races or events or things like that, then this is fine. Where it's more challenging is if a coach is involved or someone that would typically use like Training Peaks or any of those little platforms to look at your load and go, okay, now I know what's going on. That's tougher because it doesn't really support that as well. It just supports essentially your feelings if you decide to overrate it.
No, and I think what was so interesting about what we talked about in the last episode is that, we definitely said that, when Apple implements something, there's a particular way they're going to implement it. And this, it's definitely a new way of thinking about training loads. So, I think the most important thing to know about Apple's training load is that it is different than probably other traditional calculations or uses of the term. Yeah.
And it is simply more broadly easy to be understood, right? So trying to explain acute load ratio, and all that kind of stuff to, frankly, most athletes, let alone the average person, is incredibly difficult. And how that relates and how you look at load decay and all that kind of stuff. And Apple's basically saying, none of that really matters. Just look at the squiggly line and figure out if you're above or below, and then decide what you want to do from there. Which is notable because there is no recommendations from that, right? This is just you are above or below and given those different classifiers, but they're not saying don't run or do run or don't do a workout. They're just saying here's the information for you.
I think it's going to be useful that you actually can add your own feelings to this, just because we've definitely done some stupid long 8-hour hikes where our load for the entire thing's like 100, and we're just like cooked from that hike. And so this would allow for that because I don't feel like I want to do anything the next day, and I mean my body is trashed.
No, I think this would definitely give pause to other companies as well as to how to incorporate that stuff. And we've seen like Whoop over the years with some of their acquisitions try to look at muscular load in certain weight training scenarios, but hasn't really like stuck the landing on all that yet. And no other company has stuck the landing on how to deal with muscular load as opposed to the aerobic side of it.
Exactly.
So this does really kind of fill that gap for that particular area.
I think it definitely makes it very accessible and easily understandable for sure. So should we move on to the Vitals app?
Definitely.
So the Vitals app. So this is going to be This is basically going to be a new app for tracking sleep metrics. So let's see, it's going to be heart rate, breathing rate, skin temperature, blood oxygen, and like your sleep quality, your sleep duration. Right? So it's going to be tracking these trends over time, which will kind of give you a baseline. And if it sees like if any of those metrics are off, it'll give you indications like, all right, you had a higher heart rate last night or something along those lines. And then additionally, if 2 or more of those metrics are off, it'll actually give you an alert with like possible reasons why those metrics would be off.
And it gives a very long list, but it is kind of, as I said in my video, a bit of like spaghetti against the wall in the sense that it gives you all the reasons why these metrics could be off, like drinking or travel or fatigue or pregnancy or whatever you want. It's not like pinning those down, right?
No.
You can't log that we had beer on the last podcast late at night and that might have contributed to lower scores, whatever the case is.
Sure, but and at the same time though, it's like, all right, let's say with some other wearables, it's like they may give you your like HRV trends, which we'll loop back to that particular topic here in just one second. But where you see, okay, I have a really low HRV that night. It doesn't necessarily tell you why either.
No, it doesn't.
But you do it. But there are reasons obviously for that.
But in some of those other wearables, you can log factors that it can then correlate together, right? So if you look at Whoop, you can go ahead and you can say, hey, you have a checklist each morning, right? And like, did you drink? Did you travel? Did you do whatever it was? Were you overnight in a plane? And then from there, it can start to make those correlations. In this case, there's no correlations, right?
Yep.
It's just simply, here's what happened last night.
You know, what I think would be really, really cool, though, is that, you know, so there's the journal app, right?
Yep.
If they were, like, somehow to be able to, like, you know, if somebody were to journal, let's say, oh, I went out drinking last night, or I had a really stressful day at the office or something like that, maybe, I don't know, AI, I guess, you know, to kind of like tie those two things together, kind of like look at what happened from your journal and, you know, possibly, you know, bring some of those factors kind of to the surface.
Yep, and we see them doing that in other areas, like the new, or actually on the Apple side, because in the pregnancy tracking, you can log the symptoms there, right? And so those are areas where they're bringing that kind of data in and using it in other ways. So maybe down the road we'd see something like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, in many ways, vitals, like if you come from a Fitbit or some other kind of realm, those 5 metrics on the vital sign are effectively what you'd see there, and those are all metrics Apple's had for, I would argue, years in many cases, in their app, but just really deep down in like the health app itself. Like it just was not easy to find a lot of that stuff, and more importantly, not easy to trend it and see the differences to those trends.
And speaking of one of those metrics, HRV, which is not going to be factored in with vitals at this point. So I don't know. And I guess that was kind of interesting about this new app was, you know, when I was listening to the keynote, I was like, all right, I wonder if how this will actually or can be used as a recovery tool, or, you know, give you any indications of recovery. And I think it probably can, but it's not necessarily going to give you like a readiness score or anything along those lines. Yeah. So.
It's really 2 different silos, right? You have right now they're doing a training load silo of workout driven stuff, and then you have the vital silo of basically your 24/7 metrics, really your sleep metrics effectively. And in each of those 2 app portions, you can see the other side, right? So in the training load at the very bottom, you can see your vitals and if they're good or not good. And then in the vitals app at the very bottom, you can see your training load. And then even in the iPhone companion app side of it and fitness, you can actually see all them laid together. But there's no tying those 2 things, right? They just look each other across the river and they're like, yep, you exist and you exist, but we're not going to tie them. And that's the difference between what Apple's doing, what most of the competitors do, is start to tie those things together.
Yeah, absolutely. But, you know, at the same time, it's like this is kind of laying a lot of groundwork. So,
a lot of groundwork.
Yeah. So, I mean, that has to be coming in the future. And it's like, yeah, but it's just, you know, it's just going to take some time, because this is just, again, like, you know, building 2 foundational elements that will be able to eventually be used together.
Yep. Which is, I mean, I think really the overall trend that we've seen the last 3 years is that, you know, Apple's picking areas on the watch side. Like I think if we look at the 3 years as that marker, where up until 3 years ago, I would say Apple didn't really care a whole lot about watch updates when it comes to fitness stuff. And then 3 years ago, we saw all the running metrics and triathlon, and then like it's just been boom, 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 boom each year. And it feels like each year we get like the big ticket items, and then we get a little bit of like foundational groundwork that's being laid off the side. Totally. And probably the best example of that is actually the next topic, which is all of the mapping portions. Where last year we saw that foundation being laid, and we kind of looked at it and we're like, yeah, that's all right, I guess, but it's just not super useful. And this year we see them building not quite the rest of the house, but like a good chunk of the house. Yeah.
So during the keynote, there were a couple like quick little 5-second sections where we're like, wait a second, what is that? And the first of which I think was on iOS with the Maps app. They quickly talked about offline maps. They talked about topo maps, and I think they talked about like hiking routes in national parks or something like that along those lines. And then later on, with macOS, they also brought up maps, but even more briefly. Like I was like, wait, what was that exactly?
Yeah.
And then after diving into some more details, holy cow, there's a lot here.
It's a lot. So let's start on the iOS side, because that's kind of the way you get to the maps everywhere else. So as mentioned, on the iOS side, you can go ahead and now create a custom route. So you can basically tappity-tap on the Maps app and create a route. And there's kind of 3 different core ways you can create it. Number 1 is that you can create the whole route as you see fit. Number 2 being you can do an out and back, where you create the out portion and then it just comes right back the same way you came. And then number 3 is actually the coolest way, which is that you can create the out portion and then tell it to give you an alternate way back. That's interesting. And note, these are all only though for pedestrian. So hiking, walking, and running. So no cycling and stuff like that. Probably a good example of foundations being laid, but not necessarily all the parts of the house. So you get your route built, and then from there, it'll automatically push that route to your watch and this is the big ticket item, download the maps for that particular area.
However, the other big ticket item is that, so let's see here, when offline maps were first introduced, well, it was offline-ish, basically. So you had to download the maps to your phone, which then you could push to your watch or basically use in conjunction with your watch. Now, though, offline maps are going to truly be on the watch itself. I mean, which is something everyone wanted at the first implementation. But again, you know, laying that groundwork before, where now these are going to be fully on the watch. But as you were just saying, though, the fact that the map information will be downloaded automatically based on the custom route that you make is pretty incredible.
Yeah, it's super cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely, it's neat to see that. And it is a good example of a tiny feature in the keynote that was literally one line at the end of a slide that was kept on the screen for 5 seconds amongst 30 other features.
Yeah.
And this is arguably, from like a fitness standpoint, one of the biggest things there. So you've got these custom routes. Also, if you're in the US with national parks, there are suggested hiking routes. So they're taking basically published hiking routes by the, sounds like by the National Park Service, and then pushing those into suggested routes. So you can just simply tap those and load them and push them back to the watch.
Yep, totally. And so with all these routes, with these new custom routes, you will be getting turn-by-turn directions like you you know, get like on, you know, traditionally automatically routed routes before.
Yeah.
But I think the other interesting thing about the mapping functionality is that you can, you know, also build these routes on your iPad or your Mac as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the Mac side's interesting. I guess I wouldn't have thought about that. So it's cool to have all three of those. In the case of iPhone and iPad, it will automatically sync those offline maps, but in the case of Mac, you do need to manually sync those offline maps.
Yeah, totally. But yeah, absolutely. But so you can create these custom routes in the Apple's Maps app, but there isn't currently any third-party route integration. And you know, that's something, again, we talked about in the last podcast, you know, is that my question is like, all right, so if they did allow some sort of GPX route import or, you know, third-party route integration, there was going to be, you know, probably a very particular way that they were going to do it. You know, I guess, you know, again, laying the groundwork. You can do the custom routes with the Maps app. I guess we'll have to see if this will come later on with, you know, something like Strava.
Yeah, I hope so. I think, you know, we both had hoped there would be some sort of API for providers to be able to push maps in there. But if we look, this is the exact same pattern they did for structure workouts. Remember, like 3 years ago now, they did structure workouts where it was you build it within Apple's, basically your phone and on the watch itself. And then eventually from there, we saw it pushed open via the training provider API. So that way Training Peaks, Trainer Road, and a million other companies out there can push it. So hopefully if they follow that same kind of sequence, then I guess we'll be sitting here a year from now with a way to get Strava routes and Komoot and things like that published into that.
Yep, and one more loop back to last week's episode is that, you know, we also talked about trying to marry a lot of the routing and workout, you know, functionality together, but it is still right now going to be separate.
Yeah, so that means you do have to switch between two apps. So that is a big difference, I think, between that and a lot of other companies where you're just changing data pages. Here you're having to switch between the Maps app and your actual workout app. It's not one cohesive thing. And I guess also likewise, the Compass it doesn't seem like that's going to account for your route as well, because that's within the Maps app.
Yeah, sure.
So your track back and things like that. So it'd be nice in the future to see those a bit more cohesive into one experience, as opposed to being kind of three different things.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Cool. So let's move on to the Fitness app. So kind of some interesting features here as well. So with the Fitness app, you can now change your move goals, or you can have specific move goals per day. And I think this is really huge, just because I think most of us may train, you know, 5 to 6 days a week and then want to have a rest day or two. And well, on those rest days, we may not, you know, actually hit those goals. So now you're actually going to be able to adjust that based on the day and still be able to keep your streak.
Yep. And then likewise, if you want to simply pause your activity rings, you can do that as well, which is all kind of tied into the whole concept of if you're training for something, there are cases where you want to rest and recover, right? Both pre-event and after an event. And, you know, to be pestered by the activity rings to keep your streaks alive, you can now pause them. So you can pause them for the rest of the day, up to a week, up to a month, or the completion of the month, so the entire month of June, for example, as well as up to any point in the next 90 days.
Sure.
And then you'll keep keep all your streaks alive. And that's useful for not just training, but if you're sick or if you're on a long flight somewhere, things like that, where it's just not viable to be able to do all the different rings that you want.
Sure, yeah. And then also in the fitness app is the ability to customize your dashboard in the app to add basically like little cards and whatnot with particular pieces of information. Let's say you're running trends over the last 7 days or something along those lines.
Yep. Seems to be the trend lately to be able to customize dashboards.
Yeah, no, this was familiar for sure. But I guess what's interesting about this is that, the fitness app, it has been basic in terms of the information that you get on the dashboard. So, this is adding a lot of functionality versus maybe another situation that has come up recently where,
rearranging,
I guess you could say.
Reducing,
I mean, just like completely redoing altogether. So, in terms of the reception to something like this, well, it's adding a lot of functionality. So I would have to imagine it's going to be well received.
Yeah, it doesn't appear like there's any removing of functionality or drastic changes. It's simply just adding more things that you can do and customizing what's there. And that includes also some new widgets in there around like running streaks and kind of running duration, stuff like that you can add, not just to the fitness app, but also to the widgets on your watch.
Yep, absolutely. Yep, for sure. All right, so let's see here. There's also new like running complications and new running data as well?
So the widgets just mentioned there, but then there's also a bunch of new sport modes. I think roughly like 12 or 14 new sport modes with GPS and map tracks on them now.
Yeah.
Which is the key difference, right? They didn't previously track all of the different mapping aspects of it. So they give rowing an example and football, both the American and non-American varieties, to be able to now see the actual map. So if you're running around, you can see all those tracks there.
Yeah, it was always strange to me, when I use the native skiing workout app that, you basically just got your heart rate and, the time that you skied, but you got nothing else. And that was just incredibly strange to me. And it's like, I always thought it was a missed opportunity, but now you actually will be able to get that data. So, and then let's see here.
Swimming is one that got a lot of big updates though as well.
Swimming did get some big updates. I'm not really much of a swimmer, so I'm going to let you just dive into this one altogether.
So the big ticket up here is the ability to have custom workouts for swimming. So up until now, the custom workouts been limited to basically bike and run. And we saw last year with the training API, they were still limited to bike and run. So if you were a triathlete, and Apple Watch does support triathlon mode and has like automatic transitions and all that kind of stuff, you couldn't do structured swim workouts. And now you can in two different ways. One, you can do it where you create the workout on the watch itself. And then two, you can get that pushed from a training provider like Training Peaks, et cetera. And then within that, they've got some new data screens and the ability to do time-based intervals. So if you think about it from like a swimmer standpoint, you might be doing hundreds on 140. That means that you have 1 minute and 40 seconds to get 100 meters done, and any extra time you can hang out at the wall. So you may do your 100 meters on 125 and then wait for 15 seconds at the wall and then repeat again at 140. And it'll actually count that down properly. So it knows when you got to the wall, and then it counts down those final 15 seconds of rest before you repeat again and do it as many times as necessary.
Does the I know this is completely off topic, but does the Apple Watch still have that kind of like very interesting tone that happens when you do the unlock?
Yeah, totally.
The little honk thing?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's I've always found that sound to be rather interesting.
No, it's still there.
Very unique.
Okay. It makes it clear that it's squirting this water out and it's getting all happy there. But it's cool there. And then with the structured workup piece, they allow third-party providers now to customize the name of the workout segments. So assuming we remember to put the screenshot here of the swimming, you'll see it says freestyle right there. And that freestyle is actually a manually written one that says freestyle. It's not just telling you to do freestyle. So previously that just would have said work as opposed to what you should be doing. So now workout and coaches and things like that have a bit more flexibility to give instruction within those workouts.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. I thought a really interesting new feature is the check-in feature that was previously just available on the iPhone. That's actually going to be integrated with workouts now. So, this is very much on the safety and tracking side of things, I guess you could say. So, now when when you're done with your workout, you can actually, you know, send like a little check-in to say, hey, I'm done with my workout in the middle of the evening or something.
Yeah, it's effectively like live tracking, but now tied to the watch as opposed to having to go to some other, your phone or something else. So I think it's a really nice touch to have that built in there. And in that case, if you were to stay still for a while, like taking photos or just eating a burger or something like that in the middle of your run, it would actually notify you that, hey, maybe you've fallen and can't get up. And if you don't respond, then it'll notify your friends to check on you, and then they just find us at the pub.
Yeah.
So
yeah. And speaking of connectivity and tracking and stuff along those lines, messages with satellite.
That's huge. So we saw it 2 years ago with the iPhone 14, I believe it was. Yep.
Yeah.
And then now the 15, that they had satellite SOS. So basically emergency SOS texting and kind of basically calling 911 via satellite itself. So if you were in an area that did not have cellular service at all, you can go ahead and use your phone. You had to hold it a certain way, and you know, it was a bit of a trick, but it wasn't a big deal. Like if you're in the middle of nowhere, then holding your phone up is not a big deal. And so you do that, and you can text to, in that case, emergency responders that you needed help or whatever it may be. Now you can use that for normal iMessages as well as SMS messages. So you can message both people on Apple devices via iMessage as well as others that you need help. And I think that's massive. Like, this is one that was, again, briefly discussed, a little more than some of the other ones, but it was briefly discussed. But that is a huge, huge deal.
Yep, absolutely. I think, you know, what's interesting about Apple is that in general, with a lot of these features that they roll out, it's, you know, a lot of other companies may offer them, but they don't necessarily have like the more seamless integration with stuff like this. So again, it's like, you know, kind of tying those knots together eventually.
And it's ultimately giving you 90% of what people need, right? So when the emergency SOS piece came out, the example I used was actually my father-in-law, who was like the perfect person for this, and that he lives in northern Canada in literally the middle of nowhere, and then he goes to even further the middle of nowhere, and goes out there in the cabin, and you know, again, like hours and hours and hours from civilization, and so that's a case where him being older, it's nice to be able to have an emergency way for him in case something goes wrong, because he's way outside of cell range. That was emergency SOS alerts was perfect for that, because he could, if something went wrong, use his phone and not have to pay for like an inReach device or something like that. This sort of takes it to the next level, where we don't wonder if Grandpa is, you know, hurt or not. We just know he can check in easily, right? Versus in the past, he couldn't check in unless he was hurt. Now he can go ahead and say, hey, I'm still good, still here, still fishing or whatever, right? So like, this is perfect for just a ton of people who don't want or can't afford to spend money on some sort of actual satellite locator type device. This just kind of solves that for, again, 90% of the people.
Yeah.
Now, it doesn't solve all the scenarios that you and I would use satellite locators for out in the wild, right? Like live tracking and stuff like that over long periods of time, sharing that tracking link out. There's lots of other scenarios where you might want one. And, you know, those we'll probably dive into another video or post or something down the road.
Sure.
But again, for like the broad audience here, it's sort of like just like the training load piece, right? Like it's not solving every edge case, but it's solving a heck of a lot of them.
You know, and that's the thing with Apple too. Is like, you know, they're not really trying to be like the best at satellite communication. They're not necessarily trying to be the best at, you know, tracking train load or the sports features out there. You know, they may arguably be the best on the smart side of things, though. You know, but you know, it's really appealing to a very broad audience as much as possible. And you know, again, it's like it's basically kind of starting to expand that circle
exactly
more. Yeah.
So do we want to talk about a couple of their final watch things?
Yeah, we should definitely talk about some of the final more like non-health, non-outdoor, and non-training type features more on the smartwatch side of things. Let's see here. I think my favorite in this list was probably like these smart stacks and how those relate. So now smart stack widgets will be automatically added to the stack based on context. So I think an example they gave is that if like a storm is rolling in or something like that, you'll get like sort of a widget alert, I guess you could say, on the smart stack. And then the other cool one, though, that they announced was that, let's say if you land in a foreign country, a widget will automatically appear in the watch that will allow translation on the fly. And the translation is actually done on the watch itself, and you don't even need cell signal or your iPhone or anything like that.
Yeah, it said 20 languages.
I thought that was that was a really, really cool feature. Like, so for me, you know, we do swap through watches, you know, quite often, but for travel, I love having an Apple Watch for travel, just because there are just really convenient features on here for travel, like, you know, your boarding pass, you know, directions, stuff like that. But that really adds even more functionality for travel.
That was super cool. And the nuances that are, they have 20 languages that are offline on the list, and with that, it's based on whether or not your device language is set to a different language than the country you've landed in. Or taking a train across to, whatever the case is. So my device is in English, and so when I go back home to the Netherlands, presumably it'll offer Dutch translations. If Dutch is one of the 20, I don't know yet, but if it is, otherwise, when I go to France in a few weeks, then it'll show it there instead, right? So that sort of thing that is pretty handy just to be able to do quick translations like that on the fly.
Yeah. What were some of the highlights for you on the smartwatch side of things?
I think the watch faces, to be honest, the photo ones. Okay. I love the photo watch faces.
You talked about those.
So I think it's cool. It just pops up like neat photos all the time every time I look at it. And so now they're going to curate those photos more using machine learning something or other. This is a little bit hand wavy, right? It was a little bit like, okay, something's going to happen here. We're going to find the smiliest ones. I think they're like literally said smiliest or something like that in the presentation. And then from there, it's going to be able to apply different watch face, watch like numeral styles, if you will, that fit that. And it's going to kind of size things appropriately out of your entire gallery of photos. So this is one of those ones that we got to sort of dig into a bit more to understand the nuances are, but I like stuff like that. I think it's just kind of fun to have. I think it's those things that, from a smartwatch standpoint, just like the translations, set up the difference between essentially Apple and a lot of their endurance sports focused competitors, right? And which isn't to say those other competitors don't do other cool things that are different that Apple doesn't do, but when you look at like the nuances, it's these nuances that kind of, I think, suck people into the smarter of the smartwatches.
I don't think it's not even like setting them apart from other smartwatch or sports watch manufacturers. I mean, it sets them quite apart from like the other smartwatch manufacturers like Google and Samsung too.
Sure.
I mean, it's not as tight as, you know, something like an Apple Watch.
Yeah. And some of that, of course, is things that those other manufacturers can't do, right? So we look at things like text message replies on iOS, right? You can't do that from a Garmin or any other watch because Apple effectively blocks it, right? So there are some things here where those other companies are limited by what Apple does, but setting those restrictions aside, these are just really cool things on the list. So a couple of the ones, I mean, some of them are very, very minor. So they've changed or added more information to tickets. So if you have like a pass or ticket for a concert or something like that, there's more details there about that particular seat, et cetera. And then they've added a new double tap API, so third-party developers can take advantage of the double tap. That's where you tap twice, so they can start leveraging that in their own apps.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, I think that's probably the list that we should, or we have to go through at this point. I mean, there's a lot, and you know, again, we have already filmed our actual like rundown videos of a lot of these features where we dive into all of them. So definitely check those out if you haven't done so already. But again, looping back to our last podcast episode, it's really fascinating to me that, you know, Apple's strategy in terms of, you know, there's a hardware date per year and then there's a software date per year. And, you know, we may see some more software features, you know, announced after the hardware is launched. But this was an exciting one. I mean, it's definitely like really like two pretty substantial events per year. And, you know, there's companies that have the hardware launch strategy where they launch a lot of new software features, and then there's companies like like Apple as well as like Koros, you know, that have like a lot of like software launch type announcements, and you know, this is substantial though.
No, definitely. I think it's definitely big, and I think it's on par with last year, I think, just in a different kind of way in terms of different topic areas and stuff like that. And I think certainly looking forward to September could be interesting. That is the 10th anniversary of the Apple Watch, so I would expect that we'll see something notable from a hardware standpoint there to take advantage of this. And then again, we still do see new features in September as well, so it's not just this year. We're still probably going to see other new things that they'll sneak in that's tied usually to new hardware. So it doesn't tend to be new software features that are announced that roll back to everything else. Sometimes it does, but usually it's, you know, this particular piece of software takes advantage of this particular piece of hardware.
Yeah, sometimes the software announcements during WWDC lead us on to maybe some hints at hardware that's coming out. But I have no idea really.
I would say there's probably one though, which is that the vitals piece highlights the blood oxygen. Right.
Sure.
So,
yeah.
so given the fact that Apple's currently blocked from selling devices with that enabled in the U.S., that would seem to indicate that they're probably going to change their sensor.
Or found a solution.
Found a solution of some sort. Yeah.
Exactly.
For September is my guess there.
Yep, totally.
But just my guess. So who knows?
Exactly.
But
cool.
Anyways, it's a good list of stuff. Looking forward to digging into it.
Yep, absolutely.
For a while.
Yeah. So this is again, like if you haven't been watching on the YouTube side of things, we have been at the Apple Podcast Studio, which is really fun. So I can't recall if our next episode or the previous episode that you're going to see is it's going to be another special episode as well. So we have another special guest. That should be fun. Any last words for this episode?
No, I think that's it. As usual, you can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, as well as YouTube Music and YouTube. And in the case of YouTube, you can go back and forth between the video side as well as the audio only side. Once again, thanks for watching and see you guys next time.
See ya.